And this week, we're going to start the show by talking about an old lady dying, but not the one you are thinking, listeners. Hashtag Allegri out. Welcome to the Anglo-Italian pod. As always, my name is Ruair, and I'm joined by my two very good friends who I'll let introduce themselves now.
Adam, hi, how are you doing? Hope you're doing well. And
Andy, again, hope you're doing well. Love to be in the pod. I will be departing slightly earlier than normal today, but yeah.
We are now announcing our departures because we realised 2 shows in a row that one of us has just disappeared, done the old Irish goodbye, which I don't actually mind doing at parties, but in audio form, it just feels a bit weird. So we decided we're going to announce our departures. But for now, we are all together and we're all ready to talk about Champions League action. But first, Adam, I'm going to ask you, how has your week been? What have you been up to?
All I can say has been quite an eventful few days at work where I've had a few late nights recently, especially last night I was in Windsor schmoozing with some clients. So yes, it was quite the scenes, shall we say, in Windsor. It has to be said, so many stewards around. So that was interesting kind of environment.
Was it a full suit do?
Kind of smart-ish, smart cash, shall we say? But yeah, it was
nice.
One of those where it's just it was nice kind of scenes with the riverside and everything. Didn't see too much of the castle scenes, I have to say.
Was there beverages involved?
I was going to say,
there was a few. But unfortunately, I did have to commute back, so it was one of those. But no, it was apart from that, though, mate, it was very pleasant. How about your week, anyway?
Yeah, not bad. Mainly just watching football in the evenings. School year is starting to kick off. Things getting a little bit busier. The new job almost kind of has me in sales, trying to get new customers through the door. So it's the first kind of sales-based job I've had, which is a bit of an adjustment. But yeah, it's going all right. It's mainly just when I get home watching football, really. That's the only thing of note that's happened this week, I think. Andy, what about yourself?
Yeah, work's been pretty busy. I've been getting into the office a little bit more than normal. And then obviously play football every now and then. So yeah, try to catch up with football as well. So yeah, it's been a busy week. I'm looking forward to the weekend when I get to go up to Manchester and see my mum and all that kind of stuff, and show my girlfriend the north of London Gap.
It's not her first time above the Watford Gap, is it?
It'd be the first time in Manchester. She went to Newcastle once in Scotland, but that's a different country. So it's been a limited exposure. So yeah.
Well, fingers crossed for you that you get the one day in Manchester that it doesn't rain, so you can show off Manchester. Hopefully,
unlikely. I've already set the expectation it's going to rain, so it's not going to be my fault.
Beautiful. Well, I think we are all ready to get into the blimp and talk about some Champions League action with lots of goals. Let's go. And here we are up in the blimp, and it was Champions League action. And there are so much to talk about. And it got off to the perfect start with Tottenham losing to Sporting. But we're going to wait. I'm going to wait. We can get onto that later. First, Andy, I'm going to throw to you. What was the game, the match, the talking point that kind of caught your eye this week with the Champions League?
I thought the Manchester City Dortmund game was very, very sort of pulsating. I think I thought, Dortmund were going to have it, but I think a bit like Real Madrid did in last season, you see the difference between like a good team and an elite team, because Manchester City, they weren't at their best. They could have conceded a couple of goals. We've said before, they still look occasionally sloppy defensively, and but they just have the personnel to pull up the quality moments. And that's what they showed in that game, really. Like when it was almost that they needed to concede that goal to get their asses into gear.
It does feel like a trend with it. It does feel like a trend with City at the minute. But when you've got players like John Stones who can regularly just smash them in top bins from 30 yards. You've got that in the back pocket. You're fine, right? You'll always be fine.
I mean, that's confidence for you, isn't it? Like, I never thought I'd be in a John Stones smashing in worldies kind of stage. But to be fair, John Stones is a confidence player. I think we've seen it over the years. Like when he goes for a rut, it's a bad rut.
Yeah.
But when he's playing well, he's confident. He's obviously now at the moment the first choice centre back. So, and he is technically actually quite decent on the ball. He had quite big company vibes. Do you remember a couple of years back? It was like
Leicester City, wasn't it?
Last ever game, but with his last ever game, he just bangs on in. Obviously, it wasn't quite of a magnitude event-wise, but it was good. And then, we've obviously got to talk about the big moment, which is the Haaland goal. I mean, it's the most filthiest cross and one of the most filthiest finishes I've seen. I mean, Cancelo is like the best right-footed left-back I've seen. Like, honestly, considering it's not really his position, it's incredible. The way he just nonchalantly knocks it outside
on the back
of
his leg.
You boys have played football as well. Just do that from a standing start, pretty much, is incredibly hard to do. If I tried that, I'd fall over.
I think I might pull a few muscles and I might be able to
a few muscles I didn't know existed. And it's and obviously Haaland. I mean, you know what the English media is like when they pick up on certain trends. Like, we've already established 8 billion times that, Martinez is 5'9", and every single game this season, we're going to be talking about how many touches inside the box that Erling Haaland has. And the reality is it really doesn't fucking matter.
No.
And it's not going to matter because he's not there to have 500 touches in the box a game, little tippy-tappy football. He's not there for that. I think everyone knows it by this point. He is there to produce in the big, big moments. And it was very, you think about peak Zlatan, the way he just got his foot up so high and just knocked it in. And that's what's incredible. I mean, there was a warning sign just before where it came across, he just knocked it first time, and just a touch outside of the post. And it's just that instinctive quality that he has, it's nothing to do with him being like, obviously he's a large bloke and a physical specimen, but his technique and timing is
we've all seen
uncanny.
players. We've all seen players like, I don't know, Nikola Zigic, who was like 6'8". Like, size doesn't do everything. Like, you still need to have technique. You still need to be like, have that speed of thought. You still need to be like a world-class footballer to do what he's doing. But what I like, I'm going to pick up what you said about the touches in the box. Like, he said as much in his press conference after the game. He said, I don't care. My dream is to have 5 touches and score 5 goals. He said, I don't care how often I touch the ball. I care about how many goals I score. And I think that's what we've talked about it before. That is the one job he's going to have in that team. You don't have to do anything else. Just score goals. All the other 10 can play football better than you can probably play football. You just concentrate on scoring goals. You know what I mean? Like, and it's just, you can see it's almost, he's liberated, and he was already scoring mad amount of goals, and now he's liberated. It's insane. But I'm going to throw over to you, Adam, but I also wanted to give Dortmund a bit of credit, because I think defensive stability is not a word that's been connected for a while.
No.
That first half, they did incredibly well to keep City where they were. Like, okay, not much happened in the first half. It was a pretty dull first half. But that is down to Dortmund doing their job so well. Like, what did you think of Dortmund in this game?
Yeah, I think you've kind of echoed it really nicely. I think this is a kind of side that you would have said last year or last 2 seasons would have struggled. They would have crumbled. And I think the fact that we're talking about it had to take world-class efforts to beat them on the day. I think that says a lot about Dortmund and how much they've grown into this in the last season or so. One of the things you have to say, Jude Bellingham just continues to look amazing. But they have got some really exciting players in that squad right now. And I think, there was an opportunity for Meunier after City took the lead, and you thought, if only he could stroke it a bit better, if he could have hit that a bit more intently at goal, then we could have had a real good game on as well, because we were kind of entering that last 10-minute phase as well at that point as well. So, you know what? They did themselves proud, I feel, although I don't think you could tell by the fans' reaction that they actually felt that they did well, because they held on for so long. And unfortunately, it was just a bit of balance in terms of quality, right?
Do you think the goalkeeping could have been a bit better? Because he kind of looked a little bit statuesque.
For Haaland, you mean, or both?
Almost for both. I think more so Stones' goal. Like, he had a bit of time to see it.
I think
it did. I'm not going to start picking apart goal. That was right in the top corner.
I think even if you had the likes of Donnarumma or the best keepers that maybe you could shout about, I don't think they could have maybe got a fingertip to it, because it's a split reaction, isn't it? Especially with Haaland, you don't expect him to kind of direct the ball while he's doing that. But like we've all said, we probably would have got it over, pulled our muscles, etc. The fact that he managed to somehow just get it back into the goal's direction, I don't think he anticipates it. I think he's just there to block it, and he doesn't anticipate it, because you see from the reverse angle, it goes through his arms, doesn't it? Just while he's holding it up. So I don't think he's anticipating it, to be fair, Andy.
There's a picture that kind of sums it up. As Haaland is hitting it, you can see one of the Dortmund players' faces in the background, and he's the look of confusion on his face of it's kind of like when, in basketball, when you see the players and his face is in the guy's nuts as he's doing the slam dunk. It's just kind of complete shame and confusion on his face. What the hell is going on? Two incredible goals. I think Dortmund, they're in this weird hinterland, right, between being a good team and a great team, or a very good team. I just think they've been there for a while now. I always think in my head, I'm Bundesliga has two good teams, Bayern and Dortmund. And then every time I look, I'm actually, Dortmund aren't doing that well. And I feel maybe they're just not quite hitting that level again. Maybe that's what happens when you get great young players and then have to sell them, right? You never really get the full ability of these players, but they are almost maybe getting the full ability from Bellingham. But again, it seems like it's a matter of time before he's going to arrive in the Premier League.
I think Bellingham was really good. I mean, he's incredible. Considering he's 18, 19, he's very, very mature on the ball. And England don't have, for all the talent we have these days, they don't really have a proper deep line playmaker from midfield that can also do the box to box stuff. Because technically he can make those line breaking passes.
He has to be starting in the World Cup. He has to be starting in the World Cup.
I don't
think there's any defense for him to not be there.
100%.
I think, and you know what I found out this week? Another player that could have played for Ireland. The amount of players that Ireland could have had and they've all run away to England is heartbreaking. Maybe we'll get his brother. Who knows? So Man City get another win. Dortmund unlucky. Beautiful, beautiful goals. Adam, I'm going to go to you. What's your next talking point in the Champions League?
I was toying between two, but I'm going to go for it, and it's Rangers versus Napoli. Rangers, we mentioned on last week's episode that they had to turn out and have a better performance, and unfortunately, on this occasion, after 60 minutes, they were broken by Napoli. In fairness, Napoli had a few chances leading up to the dead break itself. Zielinski having two penalties and both being saved, which was incredible.
We need to talk about that as well.
We will. But I have to say, a guy that you mentioned on last week's review, Politano, he was incredible for this match. You could have said, though, in fairness, so many of that midfield or team that you could highlight for this match, because Zielinski, although we're talking about he had two penalties saved, he was still incredible, and Greaser looks incredible. Kvara was great. I mean, yeah, there's the one particular highlight where James Tavernier is diving in and he skips past him and he's just got an open goal to aim at. And it was like he does that every week now. But the one player that we did also mention, Raspadori, his touch and finish was incredible. Incredible.
It was a great goal. And
Ndombele
Ndombele finished
coming out of as well.
Yeah.
Like, this is the guy that Spurs was like rotting in the reserves essentially, and somehow Spalletti's getting the best out of him, and that's incredible. But there's so many superlatives about this Napoli squad, and they just looked a level above Rangers. The fact that at 3-0 you saw the whole stadium empty out kind of shows you what an impact. And it's just a shame that Napoli fans couldn't see it, because I'm sure they would have been ranting and raving in that little corner of Rangers Stadium. But yeah, I'm sure Craig is probably screwing at us, reminding him about this particular match. But we have to say, guys, it was an incredible performance by Napoli again.
Well, I think Rangers have come up there against the team that have been the most impressive in the Champions League so far. They've been the best team in the Champions League so far, Napoli. They've beaten Liverpool 4-1, and they've now done Rangers 3-0 away, which is like, that's a difficult place to go to. You've got no away fans, right? That is like a rough place. And you could see for the first 20 minutes, the Napoli players weren't quite comfortable. It took them a while. Rangers were, I think, were having the better of it. And I was like, oh, they might not settle here. And then obviously as the game goes on and Rangers keep gifting them opportunities and keep gifting them penalties and red cards, etc., it obviously gets easier for Napoli. I saw a great quote about Ndombele, and I can't remember who it was. It was a French commentator who said, I was told that he was like Jesus and could walk on water. Well, it would just be good if he would swim at the minute. It's such a great quote, but maybe he's starting to swim. With the penalty situation, now I don't understand, because now the goalkeeper saved it by coming off his line, but then the deflection goes in, right? So Napoli, whatever advantage Rangers had, that advantage is now gone. It's a goal, right? So the ref pulls it back and says, no, you've got to take it again. And then he saves it. So then Napoli are now at a disadvantage because of a foul or a crime, for lack of a different word, that Rangers have done. It seemed like, I know this happens once every 10 years or whatever, if you know what I mean, but it seemed like such a strange thing for the ref to have to call it back, seeing as Napoli had scored anyway. Just give it, right? So
there's a different angle that shows there's essentially 3 Napoli players that have encroached as Zielinski has hit it, basically. That's why it was pulled back for.
So I thought it was encroachment of the keeper.
No, so what it was encroachment as Zielinski takes a penalty.
So that makes sense.
The rules say, regardless if he scores or save, it has to be retaken. So that's the reason. But what I would say is the first instance where he's been given the penalty, like Ebby Sands, obviously, I think it's Ebby Sands is his first name, but he was very unfortunate. I felt that was really harsh, it has to be said, to be given that as the yellow card offence, which has fundamentally got him sent off, but also just as a foul. Like, it didn't feel like the most obvious. A second yellow is
very harsh, especially as it was between 2 players. It was like a sandwich. It was it wasn't just him. It was a bit of a harsh one. And Rangers fans probably justly would have been quite pissed off. They then give away another penalty and just let Napoli back into the game anyway. And I just feel like, is this a bit of, I don't know what you think, Andy, but is it a bit of like the Scottish teams haven't been in the Champions League for a while, right? Is this a bit of like the big stage, a bit of like lack of experience, or I don't know, what do you think? Because it seemed like it was a real comedy of errors a bit last night for Rangers.
Yeah, I think Rangers especially they look defensively woeful at the moment. Especially obviously I watched the Old Firm derby from start to finish, and they do look like they needed some reinforcements back in, because I think they're still largely, got the same sort of players that won the title, over a season ago.
And losing Calvin Bassey is massive, right?
Yeah, exactly. If you look at most of their squad, like Jamie Sands is an out of position midfielder playing at centre back, and he's looked out of his depth a couple of occasions at that position, to be honest with you. Obviously, Lundstrom's quite a flexible player, but the likes, you look at their midfield, like Scott Arfield, Steve Davis, Ryan Jack, they've been that midfield for 3 or 4 years. And I feel that with the Champions League campaign, they probably needed to refresh the squad a bit more than they have done. Unfortunately, they haven't. I think part of that is a consequence of the heavy investment to get up to the point where they are at the moment. So, yeah, and I think certainly, over in Glasgow, I think Van Bronckhorst, obviously, Rangers didn't win the league last season, but Van Bronckhorst was largely immune from that because he took over halfway through the season, and their European campaign was absolutely banging. Getting through the Europa League final. This season, though, he hasn't got that to fall back on. And I think with Rangers group especially, I'm not entirely sure where they're going to get their wins from.
Well, that's a rough group. Napoli, Liverpool, and Ajax. They've now got back-to-back games against Ajax. That's not
Ajax Ajax is still going to be a difficult game. That's the one I see him maybe trying to work something for. But I think, obviously, I guess that leads quite nicely onto the other side of Glasgow in Celtic. Now, to be fair, I think Celtic have been quite unlucky because you look at the first hour or so they played against Real Madrid, they created a few chances. And then when
they hit the post, right? Once or twice, maybe.
Yeah. It's the same thing again against Shakhtar. Like they were largely on top for most of the game. Obviously, with Shakhtar, the fact they're even in the competition is a miracle in itself because they've not been able to play in the Donbass Arena for about 8 or 9 years. They're playing their home games in Poland at the moment. So, with a lot of their foreign players have jumped ship because, they could and war reasons. So it's a very largely homegrown, definitely not a full strength Shakhtar side that we're kind of used to. But even so, I think, with the likes of Furuhashi and Hatate midfield, they have got some good quality players there. I
really think that and Big Anja, his eye for talent is outstanding, and having the fact that he's I love Japanese footballers always kind of interest me, always fascinate me a little bit. And I love that he's bringing in these players from the Asian kind of market and being like, no, these are good players. These can hack it in Europe, and giving it more of a chance. And they're doing incredibly well. I think they've got a very exciting team, but I think you're right. Against Real Madrid, you're always, Jesus Christ, it's the champions. You're always going to struggle against that, right? They did play quite well. Shakhtar, I think they probably should have been able to see it out. But for one of the homegrown talents who I fear, as an Arsenal fan, Arsenal may have missed the boat on this guy, and we should have just paid the 30 million in January.
Yeah, it's
Mudryk.
He's very direct.
He is so. God damn it! We should have just bought him in January. He's got Real Madrid written all over him by next summer. He's just gone. He is. That goal, the way he takes it and is sprinting, is somehow quicker with the ball than without it. It's insane.
He's scary.
Incredibly good
That's
player.
the thing, players who've got that close control to be able to run at that speed and then make a good decision. They'll invariably find their way at a top club because any club at any level, that is an asset. So you can definitely see him going.
And they were saying something really interesting about any money that he get, that they get for him, will obviously go towards the club, go towards their youth system, but will also go towards the Ukrainian war relief. They've said that they're any money that the club makes now, they're donating towards the Ukrainian war relief. So if someone drops 60 million on him, Putin's going to be pretty annoyed, I imagine. quite a few more. Nice little story there as well. But what a player. And I think Celtic were very unlucky, but it's good to see Shakhtar doing so well at the moment. I'm going to bring up a topic now, and this is the rise, apart from Porto, of Portuguese football this week. And a kind of trend I've kind of noticed, I've not been the only one, I'm not going to claim that, but a trend that's been noticed recently of Portuguese teams starting to do better in Europe and starting to kind of get a bit further. So we had Benfica into the quarterfinals of the Champions League last year. We had Braga in the quarterfinals of the Europa League last year, I think. And what I think is happening is the quality of the teams in Portugal is just increasing. For a while, it was only ever Porto, I felt, that ever made an effect, right? They won it under Mourinho, and then they were being the Champions League, just causing problems for other teams. Now it feels like every time you face a Portuguese team, you're like, oh, these are going to be good. And I think I'm going to start with Benfica, and I'm going to save the dessert of Sporting first, but I'm going to start with Benfica. So they have now won 12 games in a row, and in their last 4 games, they haven't conceded a goal. They are on an incredible run, and they've just turned up at the Allianz and outplayed, albeit a pretty average, but completely outplayed Juventus. This is a team that I think every year you have the surprising team of the Champions League. I think we're looking at either Napoli or Benfica are going to be the surprise package of the Champions League this year. But I wanted to talk about a few of their players. So they've got the one that took all the headlines was Enzo Fernandez. So he's a 21-year-old midfielder they brought him from River Plate. And his statistics for the match were absolutely insane. He won all of his duels, 12 out of 17 duels, 94% pass rate. He won all of his tackles. He absolutely ran the game from midfield, and he's 21 years old. If you match him with a player like Alex Grimaldo, that all of the world are looking at from left wing back, Man City have been linked with him. Incredibly exciting players. And their front three, which included Inter-legend João Mario giving it big licks with his ears as he put the penalty in. The way that the fluidity between those front 4 players is absolutely beautiful to watch, and Juventus could just not keep up with it. No. It was a very inventive, exciting manager in Schroeter against almost the polar opposite in Allegri. And I'm going to talk about my theory with Juventus in a minute. It might go a bit higher than Allegri, but I'm going to start with you, Adam. What did you think of this game? What did you think of Benfica? And what did you think of Juventus?
Benfica, incredible. Under Roger Schmidt, who they got from Leverkusen, if you remember. Yeah. So, he's got a lot of history in terms of what he can do in that kind of caliber of situations. But I think they've just got a really mature squad now. Like, you think about not even the ones that you've mentioned, the fact that they've got Otamendi, João Mario, so they've got the experienced players as well. There's always this kind of thing with Benfica that they've got this curse, though. There's always this kind of feeling that they've got this curse that will fall at some point. But Neres is another one in their kind of front 4 that, he rips it up. He's got this reputation that he could be going to a bigger club potentially. But incredible performance by Benfica. I probably didn't see it personally because I've seen the rise of Sporting Lisbon in the last few seasons, and they're a club that obviously we will talk about shortly. But Benfica, incredible this season at 12 and 12. When I saw that stat, I was just like, where have I been all this time? Like, why have I only just noticed this now? Like, this is incredible.
And this is off the back of like a huge summer. Like, they sold Darwin Núñez, they sold Yaremchuk, they sold Everton, Jota to Celtic, they sold Gedson Fernandez, and then they brought in players, as you said, like David Neves. They brought in Enzo Fernandez, and they brought in just loads of young players. And Julian Draxler, don't forget, he's knocking about there as well. So they have got that nice mix of youth and experience. Just a really, really exciting team, hoping they can do quite well. I think they could. Well, is the curse they never get past the round of 16? I feel like it's kind of like that Mexico World Cup one. They just never get past the round of 16. I think it's kind of like that. But for Juventus, we're going to have to talk about them. Now, I think, obviously, Allegri, I'm sick of talking about Allegri and how boring he is. I think the problem may actually be above him. And I'm going to lay the blame at Agnelli's door. Now, I'm going to say that this guy, since he's come in, he came into the club and he banned Del Piero from the club, by all accounts. Like, club legend doesn't even slightly cover what Del Piero means to Juventus. Kicked him out of the club, banned him, and kind of said, this is my place, right? Since he's taken over, the club we saw from the all or nothing, and people could maybe level this at Arsenal as well by doing this, but it feels especially more with Juventus that they felt more like a marketing scheme than a football team throughout that whole thing. It felt horrifically like a marketing exercise. I feel like Arsenal showed a bit of the guts and the gore and the kind of how bad Juventus, it was just a marketing thing. They then appointed Pirlo in a panic. He actually did quite well, and he decided to not give him time, although there was media pressure as well, and fans definitely wanted him gone. So I'm not saying Juve fans are innocent here. They were moaning about Pirlo. But rather than give Pirlo time, he's panicked, gone back to Allegri, who's, we talked about, completely football's passed him by. He wrote off on the Ronaldo deal, which has now left the club completely financially ruined, and they're not winning. At least when he was there, they were winning. Now they're just broke and not good enough. And he's moved them into this stadium, which was smaller because it was meant to fill it, right? Less seats, put up the prices. The place will always be full. It'll be rocking. I've never seen a ground with worse atmosphere than the Allianz. And I saw on Twitter this week that away fans weren't banned from having flares, but home fans were. It's just an absolute shit show. And I feel like Allegri deserves a lot of the credit for how badly this is going. But I also feel like Agnelli really is not, people aren't talking about him enough about how poorly he's running this club. And we're seeing it on the field now. The Juventus players were just not running. There's rumors of arguments in the dressing room.
Yeah.
Them disagreeing with the substitutions. I don't know what you made of the substitutions, Adam or Andy, but they made zero sense to me. Taking off Milik for a central midfielder.
Yeah. You saw that scene with Di Maria questioning Milik at full time, going, "Why did he take you off? Have you pulled something?" Or he's like, "No." And it's baffling. I was going to say, though, Andrea Agnelli's probably other bad flaw was he gave, obviously, Allegri a contract till 2025. And James Horncastle said it on the Goal Show. He said it was ironic. There was chants from Juve fans saying, "Get rid of Allegri. He's a monster. He's a dinosaur, blah, blah, blah." And he said, "Are you going to pay his contract off?" Because basically, like you've alluded to, they don't have the funds. So even if they try to, they can't afford to.
I did read something interesting on Twitter. There's a bloke called Adam Digby, who's like an English-speaking Juve fan, and he was saying that they won't, obviously because of financial reasons, they won't just pay him off. They'll basically they'll sack him, but they'll just keep his wages on the books until he finds another club. And that's essentially how they're going to manage their way around it. Apparently, it'll cost £6 or £7 million to get him out of his contract. But
I'm pretty sure they're still doing the same for Pirlo.
Yeah,
and I think Newcastle, was it Newcastle that were paying 4 managers?
Yeah, something like that. Yeah,
I
think that's the way they're going to do it. But then I think it's a cost benefit thing, isn't it? That you know what, by keeping Allegri in role, how much money are Juventus going to lose by losing football matches? And, absolute worst case scenario for Juventus is not finishing in top 4 or 3 to guarantee no Champions League places. So that is the worst case scenario that can happen.
There's an increasing chance they won't be part of a title race this season.
Yeah,
it's an increasing chance.
A lot of the problems you're describing, I'm quite familiar with watching Manchester United. It's very. It always filters down from the top bottom, which people don't realise. When those at the top of an organisation, when their priorities aren't 100% on football winning trophies, you can tell. Because it filters down to everything due to the sort of signings that they make, with more commercial for, you can't tell, we've spoken about Ronaldo before. At least Ronaldo was still performing on the pitch when Juve signed him, to be fair. They've done the same thing with Di Maria. When you're trying to rebuild, signing a 31-year-old Di Maria isn't really the way forward. Yes, he's still a very good player, but not necessarily conducive to a great dressing room atmosphere, as been proven throughout Di Maria's career. He hasn't got that long. Even in Italy, probably maybe another 3 or 4 years, but it's certainly not at his peak. But he's a big name and brings in that. So
and that's that is the justification for most of the signings. And then weirdly, the one signing that they didn't make like that has arguably been their best signing of the season in Milik, where I think he's the only player off that pitch that could walk with his head held high. Him and the goalkeeper, Perrin, who I think has actually stepped in pretty well for Szczesny. He made a lot of good saves, and he was screaming at the rest of the team. Like, I cannot do this on my own. Like, literally screaming, like, wake the fuck up. Like, he just... So I think Milik was the only player who could actually hold his head up high, and then he takes him off for a midfielder. And then the rest of the substitutions are like fairly like for like, where you're like, okay, it's a new wing back for a new wing back. It's a new winger for a new winger. I kind of get what you're doing. But then such is just this confusing defensive move. I think it really, really did not help Allegri. And for the first time in a while, the Juve fans were losing their temper and booing the players off the pitch. So I think there's a tide coming. It's just whether Agnelli can hold his nerve and, how bad the bank balance is, because I think Serie A is not a rich league at the moment. And if Juventus are struggling, who are by far the richest team in Italy, then the league's in trouble, really. But just a few words, Adam, on Milik since he's come in. It's been incredible, right?
Yeah. Look, the guy's got it. I've always known that he's got the quality. He does it for Poland when he wants to as well. I think this perception that he had glass legs and therefore he wasn't going to last like maybe 2 games at max has been completely squashed. He just had a really rough time at Marseille, and that's a nutcase of a club, to be honest. If you're like him, where you're trying to get a place into a team like Marseille, you're going to struggle all the time with Marseille because it's just an ongoing drama down there. But the fact that he's proved himself, I think what's interesting is he's just not absorbed any of the social media and all of the comments that were aimed at him, particularly around the signing, because I'll be interested to see how many Juventus fans are now willing to give him an apology for what they actually said when he first signed. And I'm still waiting to see that, because no one's kind of voiced it.
They've got bigger fish on their plate at the minute. It might be down the road.
Clearly. But I mean, there's even voices around the fact that why is Vlahovic on the pitch? Why? Because he's not really done much recently. And Moses
should have come to the Emirates, Dusan. You should have come to the Emirates.
Should have gone elsewhere. But Moses Keane, is he the love child of Allegri? Because every time he seems to come on as well. Like, he's got a hold on him, hasn't he? Because
he's got 9 lives, that guy.
He's got 9 lives. But it's Milik deserves better, but he's doing quite well. So he might be the underrated signing for Juventus this season, that's for sure.
Well, for the Poland national team, it's nothing but good news, eh? It's nothing but good news. Elsewhere, for the Portuguese, kind of continue the Portuguese roundup, we need to talk about, here we go. Oh, they're back, baby. Spurs get battered 2-0 away by Sporting, and it is beautiful, beautiful to see. The second goal, oh my God, absolutely incredible from Arthur. But my favorite moment of the game, was Hugo Lloris pulling off another incredible save. All his teammates run around him to congratulate him, and then they concede from the very next corner. It is the most Spurs thing I've ever seen. It was beautiful. But before we go in, I am going to talk about Conte and his weird agendas against players. We're going to talk about Sporting and their manager. Now, I was reading about him, Ruben Amorim. He's only been there. He's been there since the 1920 season. He finished 4th in his first year, then won their first title in 19 years the following year.
Yeah.
After that, he qualified for the round of 16 for the first time in 13 years. And now, for the first time in their history, they've won their first 2 Champions League games. Wow. This guy is doing an incredible job. And he's 37 years old.
He's really young.
Incredibly young. Now, this guy's career is kind of fascinating. He retired quite young. I think his playing career was kind of average, but he retired young. Took over a team called Casapia, who were in the 3rd division of Portugal. Now, get this, he got banned for a year because he was giving instructions during a game when he didn't have the qualification to allow him to do that, right? So UEFA, being the sensible people they are, ban a promising coach for a year, right? The ban then gets rescinded, but by that point, he's left his job, right? And he's like, well, if I can't coach, I'm off, right? He then goes to Braga, the under-23s, does a good job there. Braga sack their manager. He takes over, does incredibly. Like, he beats Porto. He wins the Taça de Portugal with them against Porto in the last minute, at which point despite him being an ex-Benfica player, Sporting are like, we like this guy. And they took him, and he's been incredible since. I just think he's a really exciting coach. And the tactics he uses, playing this like 3-4-3, like really exciting team. And the way they defended, they're really good at not conceding from transitions and counterattacks. And I think this is why Spurs struggled against them. Their three defenders defend so narrowly and so tightly, and the wing backs are just up and down, that every time Spurs tried to transition, there was no space. I think tactically he absolutely did Conte, and it was beautiful to see. I don't know what, Andy, I know you have to go fairly soon, but what did you think of this game? What do you think of Sporting and Spurs while you're here?
I think Sporting deserve a lot of credit. I mean, Kane didn't, I forgot he was on the pitch, it's quite easy to forget. And he's not, usually he's actually got quite a decent record, even at the highest stage. So, and I think, the goal I really, really wish had gone in was again, from what would have been so Spursy as for an ex-Spurs boy been let go, with Marcus Edwards to come there. There was a bit where it was almost like Messi gets Getafe a good few years ago, where he just, pretty much just shredding the Spurs player, like 4, 5, 6 of them in one go. And the only thing it lacked was a decent finish. But again, he's getting...
he does look electric.
He looks incredible.
Absolutely electric. It's insane
again, he's another one who, benefited from taking a risk and going abroad and broadening his horizons a little bit, which you'd like to see more. So, I think Conte's poor record in Europe, I think, will have to be under discussion at some point, won't it?
It continues. It's weird.
It wasn't great even at Inter, was it? Back in the day.
No, he never got out.
Even at Juve, it wasn't brilliant.
Didn't really make an impact in Europe with Chelsea at any given point. It's an interesting.
I think he got to the quarterfinal with Juve once. Thank you, Tom. He actually gave me that stat. He'll shout at me if I don't give him credit for that. But he got to the quarterfinal once with Juve, but that's the best he's done. Inter, they never got out the group. I think Conte always needs time to prepare for games. I feel like he needs that week to prepare. And when he has 2 games in a week, he struggles. And I think this is where this kind of European form comes from. But we're going to talk about Spurs now. I'm going to try and actually be quite sensible about it. There's 2 things. He really loves an agenda against a player. Now, we saw it at Inter where him and Eriksen had that awful start to their relationship where he just flat out refused to play him. And then by the end of the season, Eriksen had won into the Scudetto, right? Because Conte finally backed down. There are 2 players that I know Spurs fans are absolutely crying out for. One of them is one of the best, most exciting midfielders in the Premier League that they've just bought from Brighton, in Yves Bissouma, who cannot get a start. And Jed Spence, who now there were stories of him having bad attitudes at Middlesbrough and bad attitudes here, but for whatever reason, he continues to play Emerson Royal ahead of Jed Spence. And now I think Royal especially, some players are athletes and not footballers. And I think he's an athlete. I think he gets bought because he's quick and he can run forever. But as a footballer, Andy,
I tried to make it as soon as possible. We will get the exit smooth at some point, but I'm going to love to leave you. And at least we've announced as an exit. So
there we go. He is officially off.
In true Tuchel fashion, now you see me and now you don't.
There we go.
See you later.
So I feel like Emerson Royal, as a footballer, is actually technically incredibly bad. But I don't know why Conte continues to not pick these players or not rotate, not give them a chance. Like Bentancur and Højbjerg can't be your only 2 options. They're both good players, but you need another option. You need another, like, if it's not working, like Bissouma is an incredible player. I just can't see why they're not getting chances. Do you think this is like Conte's personality, or do you think there's something behind the scenes? Like, what do you think it is?
And I've heard it a few times, and this is the reason why Perisic has come back to Conte. If you remember, he was another player that was frozen out under Conte at Inter, and it's just the fact of he prefers players that does what he says or acts on what he says he wants to happen. And you saw this in Chelsea, for example. Victor Moses, an average player at the time, converted him into right wing back, religiously always played for Conte, and then thereafter he's disappeared off the scene, hasn't he?
Yeah.
And I think that kind of tells you the story about Conte is if you're in his good books and you do as he says, then he's going to stick loyal to you as well, and he'll play you regardless. Yes, he does need to do the same things like Klopp and rotates, but I think he just kind of looks at it and goes, they're players that are going to do what I say every time. And I suspect that's probably the element with Jed Spence where you kind of go, yes, probably technically better and could offer a lot more for Spurs. But because he doesn't do any of that backtracking or maybe the orders that Conte says and does, then that's always going to be the issue for that particular player. I'm surprised at Basuma. I thought he's a bit more regimented and definitely offers a lot more to his game, like you say, compared to Benasur, Bentancur. But that said, I mean, it's one of those scenarios where you kind of go, maybe he is saving him till he gets to that level. Maybe he's trying to get him grounded.
Well, in the press conference, he said that Basuma is still learning the tactics, which just sounds exactly like he's not doing what I say yet. And when he does, he'll play. There's two more quick things maybe about Spurs I want to talk about. One of them is the defense still doesn't fill me with a lot of hope. I know, like, Romero is an unbelievable defender, like genuinely world-class defender.
Yeah.
Eric Dyer and Ben Davies, was it, alongside him? I think that's a fairly average defense. I don't know what you make of it, but I thought it doesn't match the rest of the team.
No. And again, that is your loyalists to Conte. They're the ones that basically do as he says. I've never been certain on Eric Dyer as a defender. I think he's better in midfield, but again, he's doing a better maybe display than some of the defenders that he's got at the disposal. I think that's fair to say. But I think he will review it. I think if he's given the chance, there is the rumours though that if Juve were going to pull the plug on Allegri, then he'd be offered the opportunity and he would jump at the chance of going
Conte
back
is
to Juventus.
not sticking around there.
He's not going to stick around. So there is that worry for Spurs fans. But that said, I mean,
and they just missed out on Potter.
Yes, I know. And to be fair, Levy will give funds. I think this is the question. They've had a lot of money to spend in the summer. Will they do it again in January? It's hard to say. It really is. But on that point, though, I've never been convinced by defensively Spurs anyway.
Well, there'll be plenty of money when Harry Kane goes to Bayern Munich. It's fine. But the last point as well is Son Heung-min.
Yeah,
completely anonymous this year. I don't know. Yeah. I know it's still early in the season, but it's late enough in the season now that you'd think you would have done something yet. And I'm not like, I love Son as a player, incredible player. I just think maybe it's not working for him under Conte, and we've seen again at clubs there have been casualties under Conte where players have disappeared, players have not thrived. And maybe he's one of them, or maybe it's the fact that now they have other options. They've got Kulusevski as well on the other side. Like, I think maybe their reliance on him is less. Like, what do you think?
Yeah. Again, I think you've hit the nail on the head on that kind of debate. It is just down to the fact that he used to be relied upon, even though they didn't have quality backups. Now there is that quality backup. They don't need to rely on him so much. And Conte's even said he's the perfect son-in-law, basically. I'd have him as my son-in-law. But the problem is, unfortunately, he's just not doing it on the pitch. Again, it's just unfortunate because we know what he can deliver. And I think, if there's an opportunity to buy him in the January window, I'm sure there'll be a lot of clubs that will potentially lap up the opportunity because he is a quality player on his day. But again, just unfortunate. Again, I don't know if there's anything more you want to add on that point, though.
No. I think that's pretty much it. I think we'll kind of, he will obviously come good as the season goes on because he's a world-class player. We will see him arrive. I just think it's worth noting that he hasn't arrived yet. Now, on the same hand, this is the first game that Spurs have lost this season, and there's been a bit of an overreaction, definitely. I think like they're the only unbeaten team in the Premier League at the moment. Off the top of my head, or Man City? No, Man City have lost. I think Spurs are the only unbeaten team, so they're still having a very good start to the season. All of this is a bit of a storm in a teacup, but there will be concerns about Conte's European record, and it was nice for Sporting to win. So before we round up, there was one Portuguese team who didn't do so well and had an absolute nightmare at home, and it's the team that historically have been the best achieving, or recent historically have been the best achieving Portuguese team, and it was Porto, as they lost 4-0 at home to Club Brugges.
Yeah.
And I feel like there's a lot of these teams at the moment in the Champions League, just young, exciting teams who've got a nice mix of a kind of experience in there. And Club Brugges are all over that. Their manager, Carl Herfkens, used to play for Stoke.
Yes, for Stoke
people,
City,
yeah, people might remember him. Another manager who got promoted from their youth team, got the big job, and by all accounts is doing incredibly well since he took over. The standout players in their team, some of these names you might recognize: Mignolet, remember that guy?
Yeah, I remember that guy.
Silla, a young Ivorian centre-back who looks very good. Dennis Odoi, who used to play for Fulham, I think. Skov Olsen, who is at Sampdoria, off the top of my head, I want to say. They've got Noah Lang from Ajax, who has a few personality issues, apparently, but is a very, very good player. Kyle Larin, Canada's all-time top goal scorer. Yaremchuk, who they signed from Shakhtar, that we mentioned earlier. From Benfica. Sorry.
Benfica.
Yeah, and Jutgla, who is a young striker from Barcelona, who got one of the goals in this game. He now has 6 goals and 4 assists in 11 games for Club Brugges. A very, very exciting team. Really exciting.
They are. They really are. And you've got even youngsters like Kamal Soa, who's the young Ghanaian, and even the 17-year-old that came on for the 4th goal, Nusa. It just looks incredible for the finish. One of the things I wanted to say on Bruges is they've also sold quite a lot of talent in the last few seasons. So we're talking about De Ketelaere, for example, but also Okarenki, who's gone to Cremonese. Jack Hendry was there as well. So they have had some really talented players. And it seems to be, I think this is one of the comments that I heard this week, and I don't know who said it, so apologies that I'm not giving them credit, but we should be actually looking at teams like Bruges, for example, Sporting, where they're developing these young talents more so than the teams that seem to be really successful in the Champions League, because they seem to be doing it season upon season now. And you look at the managers they've got young upcoming managers. They seem to be developing a philosophy at these clubs, and I think that's really working for them, because they seem to be playing or selling on these talents for a lot more money down the line. So it has to be said, it's incredible. On Porto, one of the things I did hear, and this is from Zach Lowy, is that they should have replaced their central midfielder, and they think they sold a left back, I believe, in the summer. And
they had a big selling summer. They
haven't done those positions any justice. I did see, interestingly though, who came on for Porto was Danny Loader, a young English youngster from the Reading Academy. He ironically came from Wickham's academy before we had to sell him on to Reading, but he's a youngster that could do really well in Portugal, as like the likes of Marcus Edwards has already proved so far. But it's interesting about Porto that they are struggling, and it's not just in the Champions League, also in the league. The fact that they've got Pepe, who feels like he's 41, 51 still now. Playing, who knows?
Still kicking people into the air. Yeah.
Basically. So, when you compare it to that result against Atletico Madrid to this, you're like, wow, there's some big troubles for Porto, and it'll be a surprise if we see Porto progress out of this group at this rate, because I think it's Bruges look incredible.
They look really, really exciting. I think there's a lot to be said for watching these. I was looking at because my life is exciting, I was looking at the UEFA Coefficients League there today. And I was kind of observing this. So like Portugal's 5th, and then Belgium's like a few, maybe 6th or a few down. I was like, there is a lot to be said for just watching these leagues every so often and just being like, you know what, give the Eredivisie a watch, give Liga NOS a watch, and you will see these, like, you're right, the trend of like bringing managers through clubs and getting their own identity and being like, it seems to be working. It makes perfectly logical sense for it to work. And you get to see these players and discover these players before they get hoovered up into the big clubs. And I think maybe that's also what kind of makes the Europa League and the Conference League get a bit of a kicking, but what makes it so exciting towards the end is that you do get different teams and you do get some of these young, exciting teams getting far, and I think that's all part of it. But before we leave the Champions League, Adam, is there one more game or two more games you want to talk about? I feel like we've done most of them.
I will just quickly summarise Barca versus Bayern, because I did sit down to watch this, anticipating maybe more goals than I actually saw. It ended up in a 2-0 win for Bayern.
Yeah.
Bayern were terrible in the first half. Despite the result going in their favour, they were absolutely terrible. And if Lewandowski actually turned up, which is a very strange thing to say about Lewandowski, then they could have been winning this first half at least 3-0. That said, it wasn't just Lewandowski that failed to make the most of his opportunities. Rafinha also had a few chances. The one thing we have to say, Barcelona look a lot stronger than they have done in previous seasons. I was looking at the bench for this particular match when you compared it to the previous time when they played against Bayern Munich, and the quality has increased, it has to be said. One of the things that was really noted about this performance was the likes of Alonso and Christensen have learned from their Chelsea days by hoofing the ball and making it harder for the likes of Lewandowski to actually control the ball. But yes, apart from that, it's one of those that I have to say, Bayern comes with a bit of a caveat where they deceptively look like they're a really good side, but they're not gelling at the moment. It has to be said. Neuer had a few dodgy moments, it has to be said. He almost gave the ball straight to Lewandowski to score, which would have been an interesting scoreline if that had happened. But that said, Bayern, do not write them off. I feel this is a team that's still taking time to get used to Nagelsmann's kind of philosophies at the moment. So let's see where they are, say, in February, once the Qatar World Cup has gone. And, potentially we could be saying this could be a squad that wins the Champions League. But I'm going to hold my reservations on that one. I think it's too hard to say. What do you think, Rory?
I think a key of it is Nagelsmann. I think what he did, because they were so poor in the first half, in the second half, he completely switched it. So they were super tight in the first half, super compact, just running down the middle, letting Barcelona have the wide areas. Second half, he went, sod it. Sane, you're miles out there. Mane, was out there, and it just completely changed the game. I think tactically, he is obviously outstanding, and I think he just switched it in the second half, and Barcelona couldn't quite catch up. And if you give Bayern 2 chances, they will score 2 goals. That's what they do. So I think, an incredibly efficient win for Bayern. But so I'm just going to quickly run through the kind of headlines for the other games.
Go for it.
Kudus has got a foot like a traction engine as he absolutely smashed one in at the Kop. But Liverpool get back to winning ways. Joel Matip with the winning goal in the end. Liverpool are fine. They're fine. Stop panicking. They won 9-0 a couple of weeks ago. They'll be fine. They get back to winning ways. Chelsea 1-1 against Salzburg. Graham Potter looking sharp, dressing for the job. Raheem Sterling, Chelsea's best player of the season so far, very quickly.
Yeah, easily the best player so far. It's just a shame there's not enough players that are helping him in trying to win matches. I feel that's where he's been let down, because you saw the scenes at the end of the match where he's looking at this squad thinking, what have I got myself in for?
I ended up? Elsewhere, we have Real Madrid beating RB Leipzig 2-0 eventually. 2 players, Asensio, every transfer window, it seems like Real are desperate to sell Asensio. Then every time I see him, I'm like, this guy's class. Why on earth do Real Madrid want to sell him? He scored an absolute banger. Valverde scored a banger. I still can't believe they only bought him for 5 million euros. Absolute bargain. Incredible talent ID at that club. And the last game we're going to talk about is Maccabi Haifa 1, PSG 3. Former QPR striker Sherry getting the goal, 66 14 goals. He got the goal to give the Israelis the lead. But the fun wasn't over. The fun didn't last long as Mbappe, Messi, and Neymar scored. All 3 of them scored. Messi is playing beautiful stuff at the minute. I don't care if he's in France. I don't care about anyone who said that guy was finished. You need to come outside for a talk, because he is just majestic. Watching him play, he's playing some of the best playmaking football of his career. It is incredible to watch him at the moment. Beautiful. Just have to say, the atmosphere in Israel looked unbelievable, looked genuinely terrifying. And there was a
Yes.
beautiful moment. I don't know if you saw it at the beginning of the game. All the mascots were like lined up, all the kids,
that was
and then they
beautiful,
saw
wasn't it?
Messi and they all just ran over to him and hugged him. I was like, oh, proper heartwarming moment.
You have
And
to feel
Messi
sorry
seemed-
for the other PSG players, though. Like...
I'm guessing they must be used to it. The only one who would have got annoyed is Mbappe. You can imagine Mbappe
Probably.
going, what do they want him for? Fuck's sake, I own this club. Like, but it was a beautiful moment. They all ran to him. Messi seems like such a nice guy. I was like, yes, that was really beautiful, beautiful moment. And that's it. That's the Champions League roundup, I think. I think we've done it all. I'm scrolling through my notes. I think that's everything we wanted to talk about.
Yeah, definitely.
We have, in fact, got football this weekend. Thank
do.
you. Thank you. Thank you. We've got Premier League and Serie A football this weekend. So we're going to take a quick breath. And after this, we will do some Premier League and Serie A previews. Here we go, the final part of the show. We're getting there, listeners. That felt like a bit of a marathon, the last bit. A lot happened. A lot to talk about. But now there's even more to talk about as we have the Premier League and Serie A coming up this weekend, as well as the start of the Women's Super League. It's all kicking off. Thankfully, there's football. Let's start with the Premier League. Adam, give me one of the games that caught your eye this week.
So the upcoming fixtures, I'm thinking Nottingham Forest versus Fulham this is on the Friday night. So interesting game purely because they're two of the teams that have been promoted. Obviously, Nottingham Forest have about 5 backup teams as well to go alongside this. But Fulham have been in great form, it has to be said. I'm hoping Mitrovic scores just purely for fantasy football reasons there. But Nottingham Forest will be a tough team at home. And I'm thinking, Rory, I don't know what your thoughts are. They desperately need points on the board now. So this could be a game where they give Fulham maybe a chance to beat them. I don't know. What's your thoughts, Rory?
Yeah, if they win, they go within 1 point of Fulham, so it would be huge. This game last year, so Forest at home, Fulham won 4-0 in the Championship last year, but then Forest beat Fulham away, so it kind of feels like they were just swapping the away points. But it should be interesting. I think, look, Fulham have obviously had a better start to the season, I think it's fair to say, but Forest have shown signs of improvement, some decent performances, better performances than the results suggest, I think. But an absolute relegation 6-pointer, no matter where they are in the table at the minute. This is a big old game, and the atmosphere at the City Ground, as always, will be absolutely fantastic for this game. So definitely worth keeping your eye out for that one. The game I'm going to put up is, and this is a game that I kind of thought 2 years ago would have been like an absolute blockbuster. So it jumped out at me, and then I thought about it for longer than 5 seconds. I was like, oh, this is going to be a pretty routine win. Can you guess which game I'm talking about?
I'm thinking, is it Wolves or versus Man City, perhaps?
No, Spurs versus Leicester.
Oh, of course. Of course it was that one.
It jumped out to me, and I was like, oh, that's going to be a really good game. Maybe not, actually, but it could be a good game. Can Spurs get back to winning ways? Can Leicester turn around this nightmare of a season they're having? Tottenham won both the games last season, 3-1 and 3-2. Leicester, you just need some wins. You just need some points.
Yeah.
They
need to defend. They need to defend.
Awful.
That's what they need to do. They're terrible.
Their last game was, of course, that 5-2 at Brighton, which feels like a very long time ago. Even though it was last weekend, it feels like a very, very long time ago. So yeah, that is a game that is at 6:30 on Saturday. That could be an interesting one. Maybe Leicester can just catch Tottenham on the bounce, tired from the midweek action. Who knows? Adam, give me one more game, and then I'll go one more game.
I'll go for Brentford versus Arsenal, because I knew you'd probably talk about it anyway. Brentford at home this time here. Tony's earned himself a cap, it looks like, or it sounds like he'll be at least in the England squad. Well earned. Yeah. Are you scared about the prospects of facing him? Because he seems to be scoring from any angle at the moment. And more to the point, Brentford seem a lot stronger than last season. I don't know what your thoughts are on that as well.
Yeah, well, we lost there last season, as everybody and their bloody dog knows. I think Tony's definitely going to celebrate getting an England cap by scoring. Like, we just know that's going to happen. That's fine. We're 1-0 down in my head already. That's fine.
Yeah.
Look, I think we've come on a lot. They've come on a lot. It will be a great game. If we honestly, a draw might be a decent result there. And that is just the scared Arsenal fan within me. But I think it's a tough place to go. That is actually, I wasn't going to pick it because I just didn't want to pick the Arsenal game, but it could actually be one of the games of the weekend, to be fair, in terms of the quality that we might see. The last game I'm going to pick is Everton against West Ham, which is again on the Sunday. So shortly after Brentford lose to Arsenal, we will see Everton taking on West Ham. I think this is a game that, should be entertaining. I think Everton haven't been as bad this year as I thought they'd be. West Ham had a slow start, but starting to look better. Obviously, should have drawn against Chelsea. Their performances have definitely improved. I think this will be a game that is definitely worth keeping an eye on. But the games that have been postponed is kind of sad to see, right? We would have had the rivalry, not a derby, as at HLTCO always reminds people. It's a rivalry, not a derby, between Brighton and Palace. And we would have had United against Leeds, which is a derby. And we would have had Chelsea against Liverpool. But the fact that Chelsea have got a weekend off is probably better because it gives Todd Boehly plenty of time to
think up more ideas.
Just sit in a room and just dream up theories of how his great brain can improve our historic game. So let's go for it. Right. Let's very quickly, thoughts on a all-star game. I can't even say it seriously.
No, just don't say it. It's a terrible idea. It's a terrible idea. Absolutely shocking. Like, I completely understand his rationale, which is apparently this money would go into the lower leagues. We both said we're very skeptical.
Into the lower leagues. I'm very cynical about how far that gets. Yeah.
I'm very skeptical about this. The pure concept, if you look at the NFL example, is the fact that players do not really give a damn about these matches as well. They try their best to get out of these matches. So you'll end up basically with Leicester City versus potentially Newcastle at a best in terms of a squad pairing up. And that's the weird thing about this concept. Also, you're going to have a point where people are just detracted off from those games as they have done in America. Let's just not even give it any airtime. I appreciate there's been a lot of conversation on the likes of Twitter about replacing the Community Shield with this kind of concept. Please don't. Please don't. I appreciate it's not a great game itself as well, but not this. No,
I think it's just my first thought was, and people would say, well, it serves you right, but I'm obviously a northerner, and then I don't want to support a team from the north that has United players and City players. I want to support the team with Arsenal players, but then I can't support the south. I'm from the north. And I thought this whole thing in my head, and I know people are going, well, that's what you get for supporting a team that not where you're from. Yeah. But shut up. And it caused great turmoil in my brain. So I hate the idea. You're right. The NFL All-Star game is just a complete, everyone actively trying not to get hurt. There was one time where a player did actually full on tackle someone, and it was like a story for years. Like, people still watch that clip. So I think, it's a game where there are plenty of ideas we could take from America. Like I put on Twitter, like effective use of video referees. That could be a very good thing to bring in from America. No sponsors on shirts. Like, there are some good ideas in American sports, but not that one. Good. Moving on. We can go to Serie A this weekend. Adam, let's go. One game that's kind of caught your eye.
I will go for Roma versus Atalanta. Now, this is on Sunday. This is an evening match. Fascinating to watch these two play because Atalanta obviously joint top as it currently stands in the Serie A title race. Weird to kind of associate them in a title race at the moment, but yes, they are. But Roma obviously in good form. Dybala the other day had a fantastic match as well. That's that Monday night game, I believe, where he scored a cracker again. For me, just going to be fascinating to see how Atalanta cope in or against a bigger side, shall we say, potentially a club that will be there or thereabouts as well. So, yeah, thoughts on that, Rory?
Yeah, I think that is going to be an incredible game. We've said, like you said, Atalanta looking much better than last year. Roma looking stop and start, but Dybala having an incredible start to his Roma career. Genuinely a very, very, if he can stay fit, if he can stay fit, Roma could have an absolute bargain on their hands there. That's going to be a great game. And the atmosphere down in Rome will be absolutely electric for that. Atalanta, really, I've been impressed by Atalanta so far this year.
Yeah.
Genuinely looking a bit like Atalanta of old.
Yes.
The game that I'm going to bring up comes straight after. Honestly, guys, you have to stay home on Sunday evening, sit on the sofa, crack open a beer, and after Roma Atalanta, sit and watch Milan Napoli. Damn it, Serie A keep doing these weekends where they just keep spoiling us with these days. So that is first place Napoli on 14 points, taking on third place Milan on 14 points. They both have won 4, drawn 2. They've got roughly the same goal. No, more or less they'll get the same goal difference. Napoli are 3 goals ahead on goal difference. This is going to be a fascinating game. As we said, Napoli been incredible in the Champions League, incredible in the league so far, blowing teams away, scoring a lot of goals in general. Milan, a bit slower, not as extravagant, but getting jobs done.
Yeah.
I feel like maybe the experience of Milan of like winning the league last year, a few calmer heads, maybe they could have the advantage slightly, but with it being in Milan as well, I think that could be a slight advantage. But I think there's going to be goals in this game. Ultimately, this is not going to be a 1-0.
No.
Famous last words, but this is not going to be a 1-0. I think this is going to be a kind of 3-2 type thing. There'll be lots and lots of goals. Definitely. What are you looking forward to in this game?
Oh, in this game in particular, I'm just looking forward to the midfield battle. The midfield battle where we've got the likes of Kvara, Zielinski, and Guisa. Can they override the likes of Tonali? Can Tonali outdo that midfield? It's going to be a fascinating kind of matchup, I feel, because I think defensively both have their positives and weaknesses as well. Like they have their moments. I think I'd reflect Napoli seems stronger out of the two, but I mean it's still early days, and up top both scoring goals for fun. So it should be an interesting match, right? We've got a lot of experienced heads on that Milan bench as well. And Giroud's obviously gone off the boil in recent games. So it'll be interesting to see whether he's got enough fatigue or stamina, shall we say, to last this match. Let's wait and see. But yeah, I'm fancying here potentially a Napoli win. I don't know about you, Rory.
I hope you're right. I genuinely hope you're right. This pod is always fully behind Napoli. I really, really hope you're right. And elsewhere, we do have the start of the Women's Super League this weekend. It all kicks off today as you guys are listening with Arsenal hosting Brighton and Hove Albion. Then on Saturday, we have Man United taking on Reading. And then Sunday, Villa taking on Man City, West Ham versus Everton, Leicester versus Tottenham, men and women playing each other this weekend. That's a nice little bit of symmetry. But the game of the weekend is definitely Liverpool taking on the holding champions, Chelsea. Liverpool promoted last year. So they've this is their first year in the Women's Super League. That could definitely be a game to keep an eye on. We're going to try and cover the women's game a little bit more. We have to watch a lot of football, guys. And trying to squeeze in more football is kind of, honestly, there is a point where I'm like, I can't watch any more football. I never thought I'd get to that point. But we are going to try to cover the women's game. We know that people want to hear about it. We want to talk about it. I think it's important that we give it the kind of airtime that it deserves. So here it is, the first time. Just treat yourself, sit down, watch a bit of women's football. We all enjoyed the Euros, right? We all enjoyed England winning the Euros. It was an incredible moment. This is the time to get into it. Do it. Right. Anything else to say, Adam, before we go?
Quickly before we go, Brighton, their chase for managers, they have got some really interesting candidates. So just to rattle them through, some interesting ones as well, because I didn't think they would be maybe in that black book that I mentioned a few weeks ago. But Bo Svensson from Mainz, he's an interesting character because I remember seeing him for Kidderminster Harriers. He had a lot longer hair at that time. But yeah, he was someone that made a name or has been making a name in the German league. So keep an eye out for him. Marek Papshin, who is currently the coach at Raków Częstochowa. Częstochowa have been really phenomenal in the last few seasons. They've been beating the likes of Legia as well as Lech Poznan in particular, and they came close to the Europa Conference League this season. They had to go through about 5 rounds this year, and they just lost on the last one by a goal, by a single goal. And it's incredible. Unfortunately, they weren't there, but they are a side that in Poland are really exciting. So that's a name interestingly linked with the Brighton job. We've also got Roberto De Zerbi, who used to be at Shakhtar Donetsk,
and he's an exciting guy.
He's one that I believe Alfredo, who the TikToker from Juventus, really wants at Juventus. But the other one we have to just quickly mention, Bodo Glimt, and I'm going to ruin his name, Kajeti Knudsen. Yes, again, coach that is definitely rated in Europe, let alone just in the Norwegian leagues, and he's doing a phenomenal job at the moment. Obviously, we know about his credentials. Ask Roma fans what he did, and I'm sure they'll respond. But yeah, Brighton seem to have someone potentially lined up to replace Graham Potter. So I don't know. Out of those choices, who would you go for, Rory?
I really like Bo Svensson. I remember kind of researching him last season at Mainz. It's another... Mainz is the club where Jurgen Klopp came through, and Tuchel, off the top of my head, I want to say, started at Mainz. They're a club that produce a lot of managers. This guy's very exciting. If I was Brighton, I would be going to him, but also De Zerbi, what he did with that Sassuolo team. Honestly, his Sassuolo team were outstanding. They've not been the same since he left. That is not a coincidence. He had a tricky time at Shakhtar. Obvious reasons,
understandably,
but an incredible coach, and I think Brighton could definitely do worse. Bodo Glimt, why not? I love that Brighton are staying on brand. It's so on brand. It's so like, no, we're not going to go for your your Harry Redknapps. We're going to go
Sam Allardyce's.
Your proper leagues. Find the exciting managers and get the next big one. Absolutely on brand for Brighton. Good work.
Fantastic.
I'd be excited to see any of those coaches in the Premier League. Genuinely. So fingers crossed, Brighton get another exciting manager and they can continue their march to Europe, which I've backed them for this season. So there we go. I think that is us, guys. It feels like a long episode. My throat is kind of dry, so that must be a long one. Next week, we do have a kind of exciting interview to release with you next. Not kind of exciting. It is exciting, damn it. Let's back ourselves. It's an exciting interview. We're excited to share it with you. So keep your ears out for that one next week. But for now, it's time to say farewell. As always, please do follow us on Twitter at Italian Anglopod, on Instagram at Anglo-Italian Pod. Subscribe on YouTube. Click like. Tell your friends. Give us money, whatever you want to do, just follow us. Yes. And on that note, Adam, anything to say before you go?
No, it's been a joy as ever. Unfortunately, we couldn't cram as much as we wanted to, Rory, because there's loads of notes I've got here, but never mind. You'll have to wait for another occasion. But as ever, great weekend of football.
Beautiful. So as always, or pretty much always, I will leave you with the quote of the week. And we could only pick one person this week. It is, of course, the football genius, Todd Boehly, when he said, "We have got one of the best academies in the world. Our academy is Mo Salah, Kevin De Bruyne, Tammy Abraham, Reece James, Mason Mount, and Trevor Chalobah." Thank you, guys. Have a great weekend. We will see you next week.
Take care, guys.